Dzień dobry Państwu, witam serdecznie.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome very cordially. Let us clap our hands, and people who are watching us online will know that this is a hybrid event. We are connecting offline and online worlds. I will talk about it in a moment. My name is Łukasz Gras, and it is my pleasure and it is my honor to be your host today. And it's not really the case that I say the same at every conference or a discussion panel I moderate. But yesterday, when I was walking around this place, when Krzysztof Dugiel from the medical chemistry division took me here, I realized that it is an extremely special event because the slogan you could see here, get to know the power of passion, innovation and science, it actually got me, and I realized that I am in a place where perhaps soon a breakthrough drug is going to be created and it's going to save lives of millions of people. Few people realize that in such places, such extraordinary things are created. Research and Development Center, this is the place where which is being created now, and this investment is taking us up to a totally new dimension, not only for the employees who from 3 different locations are going to meet in one place, and in the brainstorm they are going to hatch the new ideas. I will tell you a little bit more about this event. It is offline and online version. I am here on your stage, but I also have another guide, Małgosia Siewierska, who is going to take us in the virtual walk. Hello and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. As you said, our stage is going to be a place today where science, passion, innovation and business are going to meet in its best and absolutely extraordinary, unique presentation. And it is my honor to invite you to a unique journey that will allow us to find the spirit of this place together. And we will realize that the Research and Development Center of Celan Pharma is not only the most state-of-the-art place to run research in Poland, but also a comfortable, well thought through and also very inspiring space for everyday work. Jokingly, yesterday I asked the CEO whether you have a free some opening here, because I would really love to work in such a place. A lot is going to happen. I'm going to invite the whole board on stage. I'm going to ask questions. You will also be able to ask questions. We have 2 special guests with their presentations. One came to us from abroad, from Vienna. And the virtual walks will make our time more pleasant here. When I took a walk yesterday, Krzysztof Dugiel took me to different places, showed to me labs where scientists work on those molecules. And then for a moment I was thinking what people who created it were thinking about it. I'm looking at engineers from Skanska. I do not know whether you remember that 2 days ago there was a construction engineer day. What did you think when you were working here building this beautiful center? They encountered problems from time to time, but everything was completed with this excellent success. And this is a short video. My name is Maciej Wieczorek. I'm CEO of the board and founder of a COH company. It is a unique place where we are today, and we spent the last 3 years of our life here. This is a unique place because this is the result of many years of experiences and reflection, where the most innovative drugs can be created, and they will help all of us in our lives. The investment started in 2017. That was held by the best designers in the area of industry as well as interior design. We wanted to develop a place where all the employees, researchers, scientists feel comfortable, and they also have a moment to rest and relax. But we also wanted to create a place where we would have a chance to exchange ideas, to support each other, to develop consensus in terms of our projects. The Research and Development Center as investment of a multi-dimensional nature in principle is different than the majority of facilities developed by Skanska. In one building there are spaces of different nature. We have here office space, we have labs, but we also have an office building with a warehouse. Each of those spaces requires different competencies, and it is unique by itself. Tomasz Kura. I'm manager for investment in Celon Pharma company. Pharmaceutical investment requires more diverse things connected with the preparation of air, the necessary temperature conditions and humidity in the premises where experiments are taking place. So this is a great challenge to fulfill all these requirements. The greatest challenge for the management in our construction site was the execution of the foundations. It was a high groundwater present here, which made it impossible for us to go through the whole process. And then we made a decision to perform the great craters in the green areas, and through the internal water pumping system, we were draining water from the dig, and we were able to continue the process. The general contractor of this investment, it makes us really proud that we were able to face up to really high requirements of the customer from the perspective of the quality and timeliness of the performance. Briefly speaking, 3 buildings in one had to be executed. That is why many companies that cooperate with us, as well as the subcontractors of the client, were meeting in one place. I believe that we increased our resource of space 300%. The whole investment cost us almost 200 million zlotys. Several dozen million zlotys was the co-financing from the European funds. A few facts. This is the space of over 40,000 square meters, and we find here both common space, office space, but first of all, a huge number of laboratory premises, medical chemistry, molecular biology, analytics, but also a production of drugs for clinical trials. New labs in the division of medical chemistry were designed in such a way so that they could cover all the areas medical chemists are dealing with. Krzysztof Dubiel, I am a manager of medical chemistry in Celon Pharma SA. We are running projects connected with the development of new drugs, targeting such diseases as those from the area of oncology, immunological diseases, metabolic diseases, or the CNS diseases. We are developing molecules, and we are planning to develop molecules to actually mitigate the targets as well as the consequences of the disease. I'm the head of the preclinical research division in Celon Pharma company. The technical resources in the Research and Development Center, the set of scientists as well as the network of external experts we cooperate with, as well as unique methodologies for the execution of these projects, make it possible for over a dozen of different research projects we are involved in 5 therapeutic areas is just the opening to our real capacities in terms of research. R&D team is made up by great analysts, wonderful people who develop different formulas, as well as people who have experience from the perspective of regulation. My name is Ewa Gradkiewicz. In Celon Pharma, I am a manager of the division for the development of medicinal products. In the new Research and Development Center, we are going to have heat extrusion technologies and other state-of-the-art technologies which will allow to select technology for the development of drug depending on the design needs. From the analytical side, we are equipped in LC-MS apparatus, and with high sensitivity they are able to analyze samples from clinical and preclinical trials. The whole circuit is also about many conference rooms, but also 1,500 of square meters of space, which can be called space for relaxation within the facility, but also outside of the facility, in patios. So this is a very modern facility, which also fulfills very high standards from the perspective of the comfort of air, quality of air, as well as acoustic parameters. The green areas around the building, as well as the patios that are embedded, those are really family silvers connected with this building. The very appearance they have, the green color around, give us a moment of relax for people who work here, and they are able to take a step out and take some rest during the laboratory work. But the building is not everything. It is first and above all about the people who work inside. And people in Celon Pharma are really unique, and they are always in the center of our attention. Our R&D team today is about 160 persons. And in the new R&D center, we are going to have 350 persons. For many years, our employees are characterized by exceptional discipline, credibility, reliability, and ingenuity. And thanks to them, we are able to be successful. And we can translate the success on the drugs that are introduced for clinical development and market successes of our therapies. All right, that was the virtual trip that has been covered. Well, yesterday it was raining, and now it is sunshine for our launch. Great applause for this investment. Chapeau bas. If you have any questions, you will have this chance in a moment to ask questions because, well, there will be people from the board, and then I will ask questions. There will be some presentation, and you will be able to ask questions. Celonpharma.com. You will be able to ask questions there. I have a phone, not because it is my addiction to mobile, but this is because I have this chat through which I'm going to present those questions. I was waiting for this moment because whenever I watch a game, Bayern Munich recently, well, they lost, but when they were winning the Champions League, journalists always ask after such a game, the winning game, they ask of Lewandowski or some other top 5 football player, how do you feel? What were your emotions? And I think, how can you ask this, questions? I feel great. And what is Dr. Maciej Wieczorek, president of the board of Celon Pharma? Well, Mr. President, how do you feel today? Because I understand that you have great emotions. You are so excited. I feel great. I do feel great. First of all, I wanted to say hello to you, welcome you very cordially here. Well, in principle, I know almost everyone in this room, and I can say just a few words to you. You are just like friends for us. You are even like family. It is really a great pleasure to host all of you with us here in a quite selected group here. For safety reasons, we were able to gather only 80 persons in this room today. But I simply would like to thank you so much for coming. And I feel great. Well, Mr. President, can you get a little bit closer to me so that you could be well seen? And before I give the floor to you, I would like to ask another question, because I called my wife yesterday in the evening and I tell her, this is an incredible place. I tell her about those buildings, and I asked Krzysztof Dubiel a question, whether you always wanted to be where you are. And then he said, yes, I have always wanted to be there. And this is what is missing in schools. This is what my wife says. For example, in elementary school, already there, and the elementary school, to be able to identify people who already have declared ideas who they want with such places, so that they could finally make it to such place. Well, we could use different philosophical stories to give some narrative how we should brought each other up. I was quite privileged because my father was an inventor, and in my attic there were, volumes and volumes of different books, starting with orchardry, mechanics, engines, and I spent so much free time in the attic. Every evening I spent reading books, and my father used to tell me about stories about such incredible people. And I knew everything about patent when I was 15. So perhaps it is a chance, but it shows how important it is if since the very beginning we could instill in our children the need to, to learn new things, passion, technology. This is fantastic to discover something new. And the place where we are was created for that purpose from the very beginning, to discover new things, to invent new things, not to repeat what is already there, but to invent new things. So I feel great. And this place is very well prepared to do their job. But behind that, there are people. Okay, so the floor is over to you. Everything started 3 years ago. I will lie if I say that it just happened. What is here is our natural, strategic development, the development of our company. This company has its own DNA. I've been in the market for the last 20 years in Poland, and I remember the first generic drug. I remember the first trials to create something, which at that time was simply the recreation of ideas which were created in New Jersey, Paris, London, and many other places where innovative therapies are born.
każdym kolejnym krokiem
Every step
szliśmy
of the
dalej,
way, we
osiągać
wanted
więcej.
to move further on and we wanted to reach more and more. And I think a breakthrough moment happened 12 or 13 years ago when we decided to embark on the path of innovation in our company. At the beginning, these were two persons, two medical chemists who got some projects. And we were organically developing the team of chemistry, biology, and pharmacology.
Dzisiaj
That is why today we are a fully integrated company which is ready
niesienia ze sobą
to carry
bardzo skomplikowanych, innowacyjnych
very complicated, innovative projects in terms of innovative drugs in the area of research and development. And it simply did not happen just like that. It is the result of organic, many-year-long work of the big group of people. We had to do everything in the Polish market. It used to be difficult in Poland because of the fact that there was no knowledge, there was no infrastructure, there was no capital. And that was really sweat and toil and preparing greenfield development. And for some time, I do believe that in Poland we have perfect conditions for executing breakthrough innovative R&D projects. We have very well-educated people. We have managers who collected experience in international markets. We have better and better access to capital markets. And at the end of the day, we have the support coming from the European funds, and this is a huge support. 50–60% of the resources that we invest in innovative projects, they come from the support from the European Union. And thanks to that, we are able to achieve our goals faster and cheaper. We are able to reach individual milestones in R&D work. And this is what we do here. A few years ago, we came to a conclusion that in order to do this efficiently, we have to have everything under one roof, especially in terms of crucial technologies, because the biggest problem in all R&D work is delay and failures caused by not properly validated suppliers of different external services. That is why this R&D center, the place where we are today, combines our experiences and our considerations under one roof. And we could call it from the idea for a drug to the administration of the drug to patients in a hospital bed. So it is about the idea, discovery phase, development phase, the phase of optimization in the framework of medical chemistry, biology, pharmacology, analytical development, production of drug for clinical trials at the preliminary phases, phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 clinical trials. Everything is under one roof, and it gives us certainty that the broad pipeline we are going to tell you more today, we will be able to deliver it. Who is behind that? First of all, I would like to tell you a few things about the designers. We have here Engineer Niepsuj in the room. Can you please come to me? I think that there is not a single region or pharmaceutical facility has not designed by Mr. Niepsuj. I think, over a dozen of them, 6 of them were sort of reserved for me in different organizations, or executed for me in different organizations by him. Thank you very much for doing that. The beautiful interior you are going to see, very highly functional. They were designed by K-Design, and we have Violeta Serafin with us. The idea behind it 3 years ago when we started to design this building was from the ground, fire to the water. And this idea is visible in the administrative and office part of the building. So much space where people can talk, share views, experiences. We achieved what we wanted to achieve. Thank you very much, Violeta, for that. At times, there were over 100 persons in the construction site. The construction work was performed by Skanska.
Chciałem zaprosić na scenę.
I would like to invite on stage the manager of this project from Skanska, Mariusz Iwon.
Słyszeliście już pana Mariusza.
We already heard what Mariusz was saying. That was a huge challenge.
Bardzo dużo różnych
Very many different technological challenges on the way. I can tell you that Skanska really faced up to the task until the very last day.
Najtrudniejszą sprawą
The most difficult technological issue in such facilities is something we do not always realize. We just can see ceilings as well as floors. It is about the ventilation and AC. And there are places where we have to keep the humidity between 40 and 60% 24 hours a day, where we have to have the exchange of air with the precision of plus minus 10%. And because of all of that, there are 56 different switchboards for the ventilation and AC. All the paths had to be reconstructed, and Silvesco company is responsible for that. And we have here Daniel Parulski from that company with us. Do we have him here, or is he online?
Mogę powiedzieć, że to są naprawdę mistrzowie. Jak się nie
They are really champions. How they were not really lost in the jungle and wilderness of different cables and wires and pipes. I do not know how they made it. And we have other people with us who controlled and supervised and met up, and they fought for every device, every space. People from our company, Celon Pharma. The main coordinator was Tomek Góra. I do not know how many nights he did not sleep, but I saw that his hair is a different color 3 years down the road. So I think it's because of that. Tomek, can you please join us?
I 3 osoby, które będą miały tutaj swoje
And 3 people who are going to hold their kingdom here. People who for 3 years designed all those spaces, as well as tried to order everything inside, furniture, devices. Jerzy Pieczygolan, who is head of preclinical trials. Krzysiek Dubiel, head of medical chemistry. And Ewa Tratkiewicz, head of drug research.
To są prawdziwi bohaterzy.
These are the real heroes.
Chciałem jeszcze raz serdecznie podziękować.
Once again, thank you very much, and I would like to hand in a small gift to you.
Zawsze ważna chwila
It is always a very important moment
w inauguracjach.
during such launches, when the investment is completed. It's very important to show the faces of people who are behind the success. Frequently, when I run different events, I see that at the end it is said, see, thanks to whom you were able to see a certain program, how many camera operators, sound operators are behind that. See how many people made it possible.
Wpłynęło na to, że to Centrum Badawczo-Rozwojowe
Thanks to how many people this R&D center is the way it is. It is a historic moment, and we will try to keep it ready for the future generations. You can be really proud of that, and there is a great applause. Everyone deserves. You do deserve it. Thank you very much.
Dobrze.
Excellent.
Tutaj już pan prezes wspomniał o tych przestrzeniach.
Mr. President, you talked about open space.
Wczoraj rozmawialiśmy.
And yesterday, when we talked about it,
Wyznawcą.
I really love home office. When pandemic came, and when the pandemic came, and I thought that I don't really have to change anything. But when I looked around it, there are some sectors where home office doesn't really work. How can scientists create drugs working with the pipettes at home? You can't do this. But the space must create conditions which are like home, because there must be good cuisine with a good kitchen and chill-out room. We are going to show the space for you now. Open space is the space in office buildings which makes all the employees really creepy. And I think this is a very good idea to show how we designed it in a very friendly and comfortable way. All our open spaces is just about a dozen of very comfortable workplaces in the rooms with especially prepared acoustics. The view from the window as well as the closeness of the relaxation zone as well as the employees' room. It is not really a challenge but a great pleasure to work in such a place. And this pleasure is going to be presented here, the power of science, business on the path for global success. This is going to be a presentation and discussion. I would like to invite the board of Celon Pharma on board, Iwona Girdonowicz, who is from representative of the board, Jacek Glinka, deputy president of the board, Celon Pharma, and Dr. Maciej Wieczorek, president of the board of Celon Pharma.
Please take your seats, and now you can ask questions at celonpharma.com. I will have a look at these questions. We already have 3, so I will ask them at the very end. But first we will start with Iwona, perhaps. I will refer to the pandemic, the lockdown threat to the economy, because we are still having a problem in this area. Many entrepreneurs have started benefiting from the anti-crisis shield, had some problems. So in that context, what is it like to collect receivables? I know that you probably, most of you are very well aware of our company. You know us, you've been watching our development for many years. I think that what we saw on Friday, the financial results that we saw on Friday, are very favorable both to us and to the market. That's why we are boasting about them. Receivables, of course, is a very sensitive issue because many companies now go through difficulties, so it is sort of infecting the market with these problems and difficulties. And in our case, yes, we've also had some pressure coming from our clients to prolong deadlines, payment deadlines. Of course, we don't want to be the source of the problem, so we have to agree to certain issues, to certain things, but it's not really negatively affecting our company. We are being flexible. We are trying to adapt to the changing external environment, and that's that. So this is a good news for the shareholders, I would assume. Yes, Jacek Glinka now. Mr. President, I would like to also ask the COVID situation, because, well, about exports, everything was frozen. So what's the situation now? Right, the pandemics for the pharmaceutical companies, well, it was not very harmful to us because the pharmaceutical markets, despite lockdowns, despite various limitations, our markets were growing and are still growing, both locally and globally. There were some structural changes that could have both positive or negative outcome. And of course, these segments of the market that were affected by negative effects of pandemic, like, for instance, CMI or full lockdown, no mixing of people, and so no spread of infections like colds, for instance, common colds, or all sorts of disease entities treated with antibiotics. Pediatrics really suffered, but there are also a number of areas also that are associated with the treatment of the sequelae of pandemic diseases. And here we have seen growth. The pharmaceutical market reacted favorably. There were certain repercussions that were associated with limited mobility of individuals, but they were not really affecting goods like pharmaceuticals, because all governments assigned certain priority to pharmaceuticals. So neither Celon Pharma nor the industry as a whole were affected much by the pandemics. Mr. President, you have already mentioned some of the things that I would like to ask you about. I would like to delve more deeply into it, because I would like to know, do we have the conditions in Poland? Do we have scientists, technologies, tools to create a drug in Poland, here in Poland, a drug that is going to become the champion in the world, is going to revolutionize the world? We know that developing an innovative drug is a big issue. It's a difficult thing, and let's be honest about it. It's not something that you can just do, just start and do. Even on the level of other European countries, the countries that do have resources, do have technologies, but they also have something more, something that we might call a comprehensive plan, an agenda that is focusing on a sort of diffusing science, industry, technology, and they are successful in biotech. If we have a look at the European countries such as Switzerland or Germany or the UK, these are the examples, the strongest examples of European countries where innovative drugs are being created. We know perfectly well that there are other very wealthy, affluent countries that could potentially do that, that could be the source of innovative drugs. So there is something else to it, something more. It's not just about the money, and that's something. That intangible element is a well-understood combination of science, technology support from various agencies, and also financial markets, because to develop a new drug, it takes a lot of capital. So return on investment takes some time. Time of development is 8 to 10 years for innovative meds, but once it succeeds, once it bears fruit, it's one of the most profitable branches of industry. So we have a smart strategy at the level of the company, but also at the country level. We know that it's one of the most lucrative industries or industry branches in our economy. What we know is that is the key branch of our economy today, because this is the one that truly affects our life. I think pandemic brutally showed us that and proved that we should perhaps focus more on the cells because they are the basis for our life. So I am deeply convinced that in Poland we do have all the instruments at hand, making it possible to achieve it. I am convinced that of all the companies and organizations with a real chance to do that, we are one of those. Thank you so much for these beautiful words. And now we will listen to the presentation, the strength of science and business on the road to global success. Yes, thank you. We would like to use this moment to communicate some of our ongoing data. On Friday, we showed our half-year results, so some of you have already had a chance to become acquainted with them. Today, we would like to say perhaps a little bit more about these numbers and then answer your questions. This presentation is going to be conducted by the three of us. We will divide it by topic, depending on what our leading activity is. So Iwona will start. She will be talking about financial results very directly. When it comes to Iwona has been with us for over 10 years. She's one of the most senior employees of the company, and she knows all the accounts of the company. So she's the perfect person to talk about that. Right, procedure, sorry. We've got procedures. Procedures have to be observed. It's not just about masks or visors. It's also disinfection and decontamination. So over to you. My apologies. Oh, now it's working. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, the results, they really show themselves, so I wouldn't like to talk too much about the numbers. You can see the statistics. I just wanted to emphasize that despite the fact that times are hard, we were able to maintain some dynamics of sales. We were also able to curb the cost, and we were very effectively using all options that are associated with reducing taxes or taxation burden, since we were mostly focusing on the tax reliefs associated with research and development, and you see them when you focus on the difference between net and gross profit. It's not easy, but we try to do our best. Microphone seems to be falling off. Right. Jacek Glinka, once again, welcome everyone. I would like to perhaps shed a little bit more light on where the positive results come from. Right here, well, license fees have helped us quite a lot. We didn't have them last year. We do have them this year because our organic work on exporting markets resulted in very high dynamics of growth. That growth in terms of value, in terms of volume, is translated into the economics of manufacturing. So the gross margin that is now being calculated as the difference between sales value and the cost of manufacturing has improved by several percentage points. And this is the first positive effect of pandemic, one of the few positive outcomes, namely costs of sales, marketing and market investments remained at the comparable level to the previous year, despite a dynamic increase in sales. This was possible owing to the fact that in the age of pandemic, there's been a shift of market investments from physical channels, from working via reps to participation in congresses, more virtual ones, which turn out to be more economic in terms of finances. Perhaps this is not a stable tendency or not a permanent one, but for a while it allows us for some savings when it comes to sales costs, and that's why the percentage results are as they are. In absolute values, they are absolutely fantastic. So when it comes to sales now, in the domestic market, we have already mentioned a little bit about exports, but the domestic market, it's also developing, and it's developing very well. There is an increase by several percent. So Ceylon Pharma exceeds the rest of the market, which seems to show that our portfolio allows us for a more effective work than our competitors. So market share for nearly all of our products grew as compared to the first half of the previous year. Salmax was the only exception. At the beginning of the year, it lost a little bit in terms of its market share, but in the second quarter we started catching up. So now all our products or our elements of portfolio has a positive tendency here. When it comes to export now, there's been an unblocking of sales in all European markets that were covered by the Glaxo agreement. And because of that, increase in sales was very dynamic. Also, owing to the fact that we are finally entering the French market. We started in May. The French market is one of the 5 largest European markets, and so that dynamic of growth is partially a result of these two factors. So we hope that that's not all, that it's not the end of the positive change. This is what I would like to say. When you meet someone very noble, very important for the society, we say it's very nice to meet you, or it's an honor to meet you. If we are talking about somebody who really contributed to the science or society, to us it's an honor to work with a product like Salmex, because today I think it's the only, or at least the first, Polish pharmaceutical product that has a chance to become a global brand, a global product. It's nearly there, to be honest. It's nearly become a global product. Today we sell it in the majority of European markets. We plan to make it or to launch it in other markets as well. The only larger ones where we still have some things to do are Italy and Portugal, and here things are going to accelerate in the second half of the year. But we also plan to work on other markets in Latin America, in South America, in Africa, Middle East and Southeast Asia, Australia, New Zealand. So all these countries and places where we do have patients with asthma and COPD, we hope to offer them a possibility to use Salmex. So we're also focusing on certain agreements that we have already signed. Perhaps we will renegotiate them for some markets where the collaboration that we currently have is not fully effective. So Salmex is today our flagship product. It's responsible for driving our exports in the first half of the year, and we hope later on it's going to continue that same tendency. So both in terms of sales and in terms of profitability of the company, it's going to go well. So that year started with a bang. Really strong results make it possible for us to optimistically wait for the rest of the year. And the future focuses on our innovative drugs. So I would like to give the floor now once again to our president of the board. Perhaps he would like to talk about that. All right, so as you can see, we are really taking procedures very seriously when it comes to the clicker being passed on. Right, so a few words once again about why this is such an important place to be. As you know, we've got 160 people in our company focusing on R&D. I'm talking about chemists, biologists, pharmacologists, analysts, various scientists focusing on the pharmaceutical form. We will increase that number twofold. So when it comes to staff, we will our potential in terms of research and development is going to be twice as much as it is right now. So in terms of various other resources, it's going to be threefold. So this is going to be a completely new quality, and that quality hopefully will translate on a greater number of R&D projects. But on the other hand, the quality of these projects is going to be higher. For some of you, if you want to have a look at the labs after this meeting, I'm sure Krzysiek or Jurek are going to explain what it's all about. For instance, if we are synthesizing 300 various compounds that are sort of a library for a specific goal, we can create thousands of compounds now for these libraries. So we have a greater chance of finding an optimum molecule. So this location is going to increase the amount of projects and the quality of these R&D projects. So we are entering completely new technologies now. For instance, recombinant proteins. In CBR, other than low weight molecules, we can also do biotechnology using recombinant proteins. And that is also true of mammalian systems, like, for instance, monoclonal antibodies, and also in microbial systems. Smaller proteins, for instance, growth factors or insulin, are the examples of such proteins that can be used and can be manufactured via microbial systems. So this is a full portfolio, a full panel of technology, infrastructure, instruments that will allow us to develop medications or pharmaceutical products in all physicochemical classes, low-weight molecules, recombinant proteins, but also these technologies will allow us to enter a completely new generation of potential medicinal products. For instance, technologies that are associated with medications based on CARs. To finish with just a small topic, viruses. This is something that I would like to focus on separately, because we are now ready, or will be ready very soon, to very professionally and very methodically develop new antivirals specifically directed against SARS-CoV-2. Let me start with our first project, the most advanced one, Falkieri. This is a relatively old molecule, but it has a completely new indication for depression, especially refractory depression. Using our experience, our know-how and our experience, we have developed esketamine in the inhaled form. It's a dry powder for inhalation. But this is not just our Falkieri is not just about esketamine in an inhaled form. It's not just the route of administration. It's the entire system that is aimed at full control of drug administration. Along with the form and the inhaler, we also have inbuilt digital and electromechanical technologies that will allow us to have a guarantee that an appropriate, authorized patient at an appropriate time and in an appropriate manner is going to inhale our drug. And this is something completely innovative. I think for all the doctors, medical doctors present here in the room, it's obvious that knowing whether the patient is in fact administering the drug is absolutely essential. So this is the first product to use this technology containing esketamine in the indication for drug-resistant depression. It's even more important in this indication because esketamine has certain properties that can increase the risk of its administration. And so these high-risk properties, like for instance addiction, mean that the only inhaled medication that is allowed in the Polish market these days is only used in hospital environment because of the risks of abuse and abuse in domestic administration, in the outpatient administration. So this technology is a complete breakthrough. It completely changes the rule book in the market. It's a technology that will allow us to really talk to the regulators about allowing our product to be used in outpatient maintenance treatment. So for all the patients who are on treatment for 2 years, using the drug at home instead of visiting a hospital every week would be a huge benefit. We know we've got some preliminary information now from our internal analysis. This is day 14 only, but we already know have some signals about efficacy of our drug. We have even 20% difference when it comes to the level of remission and response. We know that this is a well-tolerated molecule under this research project with monopolar depression. We had 2 adverse events. The entire safety profile was very close to what we normally see for esketamine in nasal form. So the current data confirms that we are on the right path. And we have another indication that has not been developed to date, and many psychiatrists may find it to be even more important for esketamine because of the difficulty in selecting the most appropriate molecule for patients with bipolar depression. We've got phase 2 study in patients with bipolar depression. We've got it's already running towards the end. So in the next 2-3 months, we expect to have results from the second study, this time in bipolar depression. So this is the indication that is really driving our hopes up. It's an indication that by analysts is actually found to be the crucial one in terms of the market because it offers a more potential in the market. So Valkyrie dates and numbers, we plan to end the phase 2 study in this quarter, or the 4th quarter. So there will be regulator decisions, EMA and FDA, of course, because the EU market and the American markets are essential for us. So these meetings with regulators will probably happen at the turn of this and previous year. In the 2nd quarter of next year, we plan to start with phase 3 trials. So after these negotiations, after the talks that we will have with the regulators in the 2 main markets, we hope to start phase 3 in 2 indications. So refractory monopolar depression and bipolar depression. The project is being followed. There is a lot of interest around it. It's been going on for over a year. Now we've got 7 different companies that are already interested in this program, in this project. There are, internally, along with our partners from Plexus, we have created a strategy associated with bidding because we hope to sell the license for this product to the company that specializes in psychiatry, and that bidding project that's going to start right after we have readouts from phase 2 for bipolar depression. So the several months to come should probably bring us some information regarding our transaction when it comes to Valkyrie. Just some information for you. Nothing has changed in terms of our expectations and negotiations. It's a huge transaction. We hope that for over $200 million, so this is a milestone for us, and quite a lot of royalties at the 2-digit level. So from the financial background point of view, this is our vision of that transaction. And about the market, we've got very new, very fresh data from analysts from Delva Inside who estimate that for bipolar depression, Falkeri sales 5 to 6 years after launch into the market, and that is expected to happen in 2023-2024, should amount to over $1.2 billion a year for bipolar depression and $800 million for monopolar depression. Of course, we are talking about the situation where the drug actually meets our expectations when it comes to its clinical development. Falkeri is now in phase 2, but we have another neuropsychiatric project also in phase 2, and that is CPL-36. That's the short name for it. It's a phosphodiesterase 10A inhibitor that we are developing for schizophrenia and Parkinson's disease, and well, specifically for dyskinesia in Parkinson's disease. So these two studies are now being launched. The schizophrenic one should be on the move within weeks. So the first administrations are going to happen. For dyskinesia, we expect the study to start at the turn of the year. So it's a very promising project as well, and I would like to emphasize first and foremost that our molecule is best in class. It's got excellent PK. We know that from phase 1, linear PK. So all that translates into a lot of hope for us, hope for signals about efficacy already in phase 2. Of course, all psychiatrists know that schizophrenia is a huge market. Dyskinesia in Parkinson's disease, it's also something that we are all waiting for. So this is a very promising project. And another 3 elements of our pipeline. The first one in oncology, we've been developing it for 18 months more or less. It's FGFR inhibitor that is being used in various solid tumors in patients with FGFR aberrations. We mostly focus on bladder, lung, squamous cell mostly, and stomach cancer. That it's in 1.1b. That's the phase of clinical development that we have right now. We should finish by the end of the year. There are also some signals regarding efficacy, and it's a very attractive sounding project. In fact, there are 2 molecules already in the market present globally. So this is a validated molecular goal. Response to the molecules that have already been launched into the market indicate considerable benefit for the patient. So 30 to 40% efficacy. This is in advanced oncology diseases, something really exceptional. And we also have 2 more molecules. One is a metabolic project. This is a GPR40 receptor agonist that's going to be developed for diabetes and diabetic neuropathy. And I think the major success, especially when it comes to medical chemistry, was to find a completely new chemical structure that would allow us for achieving a very potent effect working on GPR40 receptors. Because of a completely new chemical structure, completely new properties, that molecule it's not limited by hepatotoxicity, and this is major limitation for other similar molecules. GP40 is a molecular target that was surrounded by a lot of hopes, and then it suddenly turned out that nearly all of the molecules that had a certain chemical structure close to what Takeda offered were hepatotoxic, and we are the first company to offer a completely new chemical structure. To date, all our results from preclinical trials, toxicology trials, and also phase 1 trials, because this is now in phase 1, clinical phase 1, we have administered it to several dozen patients, and we see no signs of hepatotoxicity, no elevation of liver enzymes, so it's a very good sign. It's a huge market. And other than that, something else completely unique, we see that our GP40 agonist causes a very strong effect when it comes to diabetic neuropathies. So that silo of use seems to be very obvious. Patients who are not sufficiently controlled on metformin, on other drugs in diabetes type 2, it seems that this is going to become a standard for diabetic treatment. And so patients who are not sufficiently controlled and yet they do have certain signs and symptoms of neuropathy, it seems that our molecule would be the right way to go for them. So it's a huge market, very important project for us. And we are going forward. I think right after finishing phase 1, we are ready to launch phase 2 with the reading out of the results mid next year.
And the last project that I wanted to tell you about, and we submitted the application for the beginning of phase 1 trials. It is a dual inhibitor, JAK-ROC. For you clinicists who are already involved in JAK inhibitors, we know that this is a very desired class of drugs with strong anti-inflammatory activity, and we can see that their significance is great in all autoimmunological disorders. So there is an opportunity of getting some steroids without the side effects that are typical for steroids. But by means of additional kinase inhibition, we expect anti-fibrotic effect and cardioprotective effect. That is why the clinical place of the dual JAK-ROC inhibitor is patients with autoimmune diseases where the JAK kinase inhibition is desired, but who at the same time present with the potential risk for the adverse events connected with the involvement of the heart. We also have very strong data from animal studies on animals, from preclinical trials. This drug is very good where the anti-inflammatory and as well as other components are required, for example, pulmonary hypertension and pulmonary fibrosis. So we are actually increasing the potency by the dual JAK-ROC inhibitor. The last project is the one that we received information about 2 weeks ago from NCBR, connected with the co-financing of our strategy for the development of SARS-CoV-2 drugs development. I would like to tell you that this is a very fashionable subject. Everyone is very excited. People were successful or were not successful. We asked Professor Burostul, who is going to say a few words about SARS-CoV-2 epidemic, how we can do that. But well, I wanted to tell you that we always believe that if something is done, it should be done properly, because if we do not do this properly, we will fail to achieve anything. That is why we wanted to sort of run away from the thinking that we will be able to reposition some drug that perhaps on the occasion of some in vitro we would be able to get some efficacy. But in our project, we focused on what we believe is important. In case of SARS-CoV-2, we think that from the molecular perspective, it is crucial to inhibit the entry of the virus to the cell. And one of the legs of this project is the inhibition or the blockade of the protease that is involved in that process. And the other molecular target, which at that time in March, when we designed this project and we hypothesized that it should be effective, is the inhibition of the RNA polymerase and DNA-dependent polymerase. That is why this is the mechanism which makes sure that when the virus, when it already is in the cell, is not able to add additional RNA fragments. It is like a Trojan horse strategy. It is a drug that is an analog of such an RNA fragment, and in our case it is about adenine. The polymerase, the enzyme, at a certain point, well, at first it sort of says, come, I will connect you to my chain, and a few nucleotides down the road, it simply blocks. It notices that it is not the right RNA fragment for the continuation of the polymerase process. Right. On the one hand, it is quite illustrative, and on the other side, it's a proper mechanism which we are able to methodically check in vitro from the very beginning, and we can control it. And for this, we are able to develop the library of the most efficacious substances, compounds, which at the same time are dedicated to SARS-CoV-2, because the repositioning is always connected with something we do not know and we do not understand, for example, toxicity. And this is a case of quite many drugs which at first seemed to be very effective, and today we know that they are not effective or efficacious. For example, hydroxychloroquine. The project is launched. We got 40 million co-financing for that project, and under that project we are planning 2 libraries of the compound dedicated to SARS-CoV-2. In the framework of the National Center for Research and Development, we are building the laboratory virus dedicated, and it has all the requirements in order to fulfill the BSL-3 certification. It is absolutely a must for this project to move on. And then halfway through 2022, we will be able to test the drugs and compounds that are properly designed and developed for the treatment of SARS-CoV-2. Perhaps it is quite distant, but I have a feeling, I suspect, that we'll have to learn how to live with SARS-CoV-2. It is not going to pass. We'll see what the professor is going to say about it. A pipeline is very broad. Someone could say, how come companies from San Diego, from Boston have just one product? They develop it for 10 years. They get several $100 million for development. A company from Łomianki or Kazun today has 15 or 16 projects at different stages of development. Yes, but please remember that we started so many years ago. Please remember that our company is not a company of one technological platform. This is about the silos of specialized persons in oncology, metabolic diseases, autoimmune diseases, as well as neuropsychiatric disorders. And these people are experts in their disciplines. That is why we have the possibility to develop these projects from such a wide range of different indications. Moreover, we are saying that it's a perfect moment for development and innovative therapies in Poland. Please note that there is another unique feature. You will not be able to identify for startups that are involved in innovation in San Diego or in Boston. Next to the regular generation of cash, financial accumulation from our ongoing activity, which is assessed as several dozen million zlotys annually, we also are using European funds. So 50 plus 60% of the cost of R&D projects are funded by the European Union money. We have about 400 million zlotys allocated as a co-financing for our R&D projects today. We also are involved in partnering. Every project, every mature project in our strategy is to be partnered up in phase 2 or after phase 2. FGFR is an exception. We're already after phase 1B. We will be able to partner up with this compound. So the partnering also adds us additional resources for the investment in other products in the pipeline. The upcoming agreement is scattering Falkieri and 2 other drugs, which is FGFR and the GP40. So these are the projects, these are the programs which are also going to be partnered up next year, roughly second half of 2021. It is not really the case that we know what the total amount of milestones and the upfront milestone in the case of Partamint, but we know that the median is at the level $200 million plus, and upfront is about 10% of the sum. So this is the assumption that we can accept. And at the end of the day, some of you here are analysts and people who are involved with capital markets. For over 4 years, we've been a part of the stock exchange, so we are a public company. So depending on the needs, we are also able to get in the future some, SPO, additional capital, as an additional capital if we come to the conclusion that we want to invest in clinical project development. The strategy which we will definitely not identify in San Diego, because this is our own copyrighted strategy, which is caused by our local conditions and for the DNA of our company. But this strategy is something we deeply believe in, and we believe that it's going to give us success. How large is the success going to be? Are we going to be able to introduce 2 innovative drugs within the next 6 or 7 years, or is it going to be 3 drugs? We don't know that. We are humble. We also know that the development of innovative drugs is about ups and downs, and it may turn out that we will not be able to do it with some of them, and it will turn out that something was already on the shelf, like GP40 was such a product. It was on the shelf to be thrown out, but it will turn out to be a product which is going to bring us a huge success.
To jest informacje, którą Państwo będziecie mogli.
So this is information that you are going to follow. A week ago, we submitted an application for clinical development of our dual JAK-ROC inhibitor. As assumed, in the next quarter, we are going to have 6-week-long update, clinical update from phase 2 trial in the monopolar depression, and we are also going to get the bipolar depression readouts. So this is very important, especially for the bipolar depression. Then clinical development, phase 1 and phase 2. As far as phase 1 of GP40, we are planning to complete this trial by the end of the year and start the phase 2 trial. And there are subsequent drugs, a dual JAK-ROC inhibitor. All the information is going to be shared with you on the ongoing basis. So a lot is going to happen throughout the coming year, and I would like to invite you to follow our achievements. Thank you.
Dziękuję bardzo, panie prezesie. Państwa zapraszam do zadawania pytań.
Thank you very much. I would like to invite you to ask questions, and I would like to ask you to ask questions at TalonPharma.com. There is a window with comments, and please ask your questions there. It was really a pleasure to listen to your presentation, and as a layman, I felt as if I was part of the computer game. When you were talking about finding a way for COVID, for the virus, we are looking for the virus, we are allowing it to attach nucleotides to RNA, and then we say, well, we deceived you, you were cheated. It looks like chess. It is excellent. People don't realize it. People don't realize what it is like. Right, and please note that today we know that 2 drugs are effective in SARS-CoV-2. And the first one, remdesivir, which presented with a decrease of mortality at the level of about 30%, as well as the shortening of the time in hospital. Remdesivir is a drug which uses this particular mechanism. This is the mechanism of the inhibition of the RNA polymerase of the virus. But it is a very limited drug because it must be administered intravenously because it's of its physicochemical properties. So our project, since the very beginning, assumes the selection of those drugs which would be, or compounds that could be administered via inhaling or orally. From the pharmacoeconomic perspective, we assume that the biggest loss and the biggest cost of treatment of SARS-CoV-2 is hospitalization. So if we allow the situation to happen that these patients will have to be hospitalized, then, well, unfortunately, it is going to lead to the collapse of our healthcare system, and it's the domino effect. All the bricks start to go down, and then the delivery of an effective drug to be applied at home by drugs in the form of inhaling or orally administered drug. This is what we want to get. Then we would simply close this virus. Well, this person is confined at home if the infection is confirmed, and let us assume that 80–90% of these patients will not really deteriorate. There will be no exacerbation, and they will not have to be admitted. So when we have this drug, we can start thinking about SARS-CoV-2 as something which is like, confined, locked down, just one person at home. And if we have, for the time being, just remdesivir and dexamethasone, which is used in patients who are quite severe in hospital conditions, we have a drug which leads to the fact that 30% fewer patients are going to die. But this is not a fundamental change of the strategy, and only home treatment will be providing that. It is really quite interesting. Well, Mr. President, I would like to say this. I am thinking that next to this drug for SARS-CoV-2, it would also be great to get another drug that would be good for depression, because I had, I had the symptomatic COVID. I did not have isolation conditions at home. I was transported to the isolation facility. It was like, a hotel that was transformed into the isolation facility. I spent 17 days there, and at a certain moment, you look just out the window, and you have nothing to do. You open the window. You can't open the window. You open the door only to get some food from the service. I was writing reading my book, but from the time being, I was looking out of the window, and other people were also looking out of the window. And there was a man next to me who was there for 7 weeks. And then I thought, okay, I will manage. But if you are depressive and you are closed for such a long time, COVID is not just a challenge connected with the neutralization of the virus. It is my observation. And now questions from the room. There is a question. You mentioned that COVID project is going to be clinically used in 2022. But against the background of other competitors who are all now testing their drugs, isn't it too far ahead in the future? Do you think that this project is really viable? Well, as far as we said, in the case of competition, it is mainly about the repositioning of the drugs that are already marketed. This is a quite distant prospect, I do realize, but we assume that COVID is not going to disappear next year. We assume that COVID is going to create a big market. It is a disease that will require treatment strategies. An opportunity for today, those several dozen repositioned drugs that we will be able to identify an effective drug, it's very low. So the fact that quite many companies simply use their drugs off the shelf, drugs that are used by them as anti-inflammatory or anti-malaria drugs, well, the chance is quite low. And all the readouts from the clinical trials show that. So yes, but we want to do this good. We are really methodical in our approach, and our drug is going to be effective. Another question from a chat box, but if you have questions, I will allow you to do that. When I finish these questions, I will ask you just to raise your hand, and the person with the microphone will come up and give you the mic. Are you planning to introduce new generics to the Polish market? Let me answer. Just one word. No. We have a fantastic portfolio of drugs today, Bonotox, Ketrel, we have Salma that are leaders in their class. We also have a dedicated infrastructure for sales and marketing, and it would really be great to use it and to add additional ammunition to our structure. So we are waiting for getting additional generic drugs to our portfolio so that the structure that we created in Poland could really be successful, so that could really spread wings. Next question from people who are watching us online. On celonpharma.com transmission. Aren't you afraid that the distance from Warsaw will scare employees off? Well, obviously, it would be better if we were at a corner of Marszałkowska Street for quite many people. But it is a standard today that the companies in R&D laboratories, well, please remember, it's a small production line, well, the second, the third, the fourth, and in this center we also have the animal facility where we also have the different studies executed on rodents. So we really have to get away from the city centers, like Warsaw and the closest vicinity. But we are planning and organizing the shuttle transportation from the underground station. It's like 35 minutes of commute because we are always traveling against the traffic. And not peak time. I think that such a shuttle will take not longer than from Bielany to Ursynów, especially in the traffic jam. Well, it is a distance, but there are some advantages. And additionally, I was 4 kilometers from here. I'm an athlete, so I could jog in the morning. And the woods, and it's so beautiful. You can really save some time, because otherwise I would really have to go to work, to the city, and then find a place where I can jog. Well, if you just move to Warsaw and then they get work from us, it is better for us, for this person to live in Bielany and not Ursynów. This is the location which is more convenient for employees. It makes some difference, but I think that today everyone is asking a question where to just settle roots and where their place on earth is. Another question. Is this R&D center fully equipped, or will it be necessary to buy additional equipment? How advanced the spendings are in this process? Everyone builds a house, at least once in a lifetime. An R&D center is such a house. We are not going to build it for the upcoming quarter or 1 year, but we wanted to build it for decades to come. That is why it simply gives us a possibility to move in immediately and use most of technology and equipment. But in a way, it is quite flexible for further development within the next decade or more. So it is like a continuity of the development of the project. It is not really the case in any company that is involved in research that you do something, you just lock it, and that's done. Well, nothing is changing in it for the next 30 years. 50-60% of the equipment is already in place, or it's already acquired, and it gives us the comfort for us to be able to continue all the projects or to start some new projects. Other projects are dedicated for other projects that we are going to be involved in. We'll be buying additional equipment. For now, we have 20-30% of equipment already installed on site, and it's been moved from our previous center. A significant part of it is in the warehouse. From tomorrow on, when this meeting is over, we are going to unpack it and start introducing this on site. That is why we can actually seamlessly move on through our R&D operations. Well, Krzysztof Dubiel, when he took me here yesterday, he showed to me 3 devices, I think the most modern devices in Poland. What was that? Most probably those were NMRs, and we really have them really very strong, 600 devices. I think the only ones in Poland with that power. Those are the devices that gives us the possibility of very precise analysis of chemical structure of compounds, and I think that Krzysiek is going to brag about 2 more questions, or even 3-4 questions are going to be asked, and then we are going to wrap it up, and then the audience. So I would like to ask for update concerning the marketing of Salmex to the American market, as well as increasing the value of non-tangible and legal value from 6.2 million to 56.9 million in the balance sheet of the company. Talking about the non-tangible and legal value, I would like to say a few comments now, and as far as the United States is concerned, Jacek will answer because he is involved in negotiations on the ongoing basis. It is true that the non-tangible and legal assets went up in the balance sheet, and this is the item where we book different acquisition of license, rights, databases, and libraries of compounds. This item has been fluctuating. Together with the auditor, we concluded that in this moment of time, we are going to introduce the estimate of future liabilities on non-tangible and legal assets from the future, the assessed value also resulting from the agreement with the Glaxo company. So we are simply estimating all the future long-term liabilities or commitments also resulting from that. So this is the item. And now what about the American market, Jacek? We expected that this question would be asked. The American market is the largest global market for the combination of those drugs. So this is a very important market, one of the priority markets where we would like to launch the sales. And we are present with our partner from the Lupin company. This project is significantly delayed, as it is really the case in difficult projects in pharmaceutical industry. Some research is better, some is a little worse. And here, what is required for the approval in the United States is, dragging a little bit. So we are considering different scenarios, but we are still convinced that we want to focus our activities in such a way so that we could enter the American market as soon as possible. Thank you very much. I have 2 more questions from, online presentation, but if there is anyone else, you can ask this question by raising your hand. If it is not really the case, I will ask my questions. I don't see anyone. Or perhaps you want to be anonymous. Does Echelon cooperate with Mabion? Does it support its plans financially? No, we are a totally independent organization. As Echelon Pharma, we have a certain package of shares in Mabion company, and that's all. SPO issue. What about it? Is it really current? Is it going to happen? As you could see, our ambition is high. Plans are also vast. That is why our capital demand will have to be reliably analyzed in different scenarios. And those scenarios are on the table. We are a company which is model company because we really have a great growth potential in this company. In our scenarios, we're also considering the SPO, but we are still considering medium-term or not short-term prospect. The last question, what are the threats for the execution of the basic products? Do you see any?
Oczywiście badania I rozwój zawsze
Certainly, research and development is always related to risk. We can't.
Jak gdyby naszym zadaniem tutaj
Well, our task today is to analyze every project and to mitigate these risks.
Natomiast ja muszę powiedzieć, że w zasadzie staramy się
But I have to
bardzo
tell you
mocno nie przygotować
that
się do wejścia jako projekt.
we are trying not to attach to these projects already at the preclinical stage. We trash quite many projects. So we have internal procedures telling us what is crucial, what is important for our compound to be moved to toxicological and clinical trials.
Statystyka jest jaka jest.
Well, the statistics is merciless. We do not know whether it's going to be 50% of projects that will be successful or 30% of them. But the difference between us and huge corporations that love keeping ineffective projects is that we eliminate such projects at early stages. And this is our feature. Thank you very much for very detailed answers. And for this question, Iwona Giedronowicz, Financial Director of the Board, Jacek Glinka, Deputy President of the Board, and Dr. Maciej Wieczorek, President of the Board. And a great applause. And, well, you really can get back to your seats. And the questions will not be forgotten, because those that keep asking questions using the salonpharma.com, you will get your answers from the Investors Division by email. And I am looking for the script. There is another very pleasant point of the agenda, because, you know, lunch is prepared for you. It is to my left, but it will take us a moment. And for the time being, we are going to invite you to the virtual walk to the place like the kitchen. Kitchen is always the heart of every home. But Małgosia is going to take us to the virtual walk to show us the canteen. We have Viola Serafin with us from the architectural office, K-Design, and she, they were involved in the architectural design of this place. Viola is going to help us to discover those small things which are not that obvious, those details that make this place unique and give it character, and we do not necessarily see all of them. Hi, Vera. Hi. We went down to ground zero, where you can find a place which in every house or every home is a heart. It is the place of meetings, talks, sharing ideas as food, good food. Yes, because the main assumption was multiculturalism. The menu is going to be made up of different dishes from different parts of the world. That is why in this restaurant, every place, every zone that we created has a different character. Now we are sitting at a large table, but we also have another table at the window. We also have couches, and we have small tables. But you can also see a large couch where you can really have a very pleasant lunch. And on the table, we can see tiles, and those tiles are colorful. What we really wanted to achieve was to make sure that all the materials that are present in the interior here were natural, so that they could age beautifully, and so that they could become more powerful with time. Those tiles came from a factory in Łomianki, not far away from here, and they were manually made. Every tile is different, and the difference between them is also in sizes, but it was beautiful. They are beautifully placed, and they also have very natural and deep colors. And you know what? In this interior, they give energy. Each of the walls has a different color. We also have a mural. We also have, some upholstery on the wall, so that the acoustic could be good. Every zone has a different power, different energy. We are sitting at this table. I keep touching it. It is oiled, it is long, and a big group of people can sit down at this table and discuss so many other things which were touched above, and there was some brainstorm, and we can bring it down and continue it here. Well, the canteen also has the full restaurant back office, if you will. It means that you will be able to prepare all the meals on the spot. Yes, it is extraordinary. It's a great thing about this place, because it's not going to be, catered and served here. It's going to be a real, genuine kitchen on the spot. A great advantage of such a place. of this office. Additionally, this canteen is connected with a patio. That means that when it is sunshine, it's a great possibility to take a break in your work, have something very nice in the sun. We know that Mr. Wieczorek loves high quality, but also good cuisine. So I think that it is not a regular canteen for employees. It is a place which is going to be very interesting on the food map of Warsaw. Thank you very much for yet another virtual trip, and we are moving on to the next point in the agenda. I have to change the language.
I would like to present you and introduce our guest from Vienna, Henning Eskuchen, Head of CE Equity Research of Erste Group Bank AG. Welcome. Take a seat, please. Two questions from my side before your presentation, because I know that you had an opportunity to walk around. You like this place? How do you like this place?
Yeah, well, it's certainly a very impressive building. And I mean, if the saying is true that only a healthy body is home to a healthy brain, if that building is the body, then I would expect a lot from the brain of the people working here. That's for sure.
Yeah, true. We are living in a strange times. COVID-19 Black Swan appeared suddenly, destroyed our economy and life. How does it, the investment like this, fit in the current situation?
Yeah, I mean, in general, such an investment, we have heard the numbers are always coming with a very particular risk. I think an investment in R&D in healthcare in this environment actually is good to reduce that risk, because right now I couldn't imagine anything better where to put my money, because for good reasons, we have a lot of projects that should create that return.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us today. The scene is yours, and we're waiting for your presentation.
Thank you. Good. So just a quick step back into short-term history. What happened in the beginning of the year? What was the impact on the economy, which you all are aware was massive? What we see here and what is the hope is that the main impact, in fact, was focusing on this second quarter. What we do see is for some countries, for some areas, there was indeed already an impact. First quarter, that already tells you those economies, those countries taking early measures suffered more, are going deeper in recession. Those taking measures late, taking less measures, obviously avoided economic damage. You see the US as the main example, but apparently they're paying a high price in the US, 200,000, probably more, being dead. Going forward with the hope that the coming quarter, the quarter we are closing now, and the coming one is going to be better, we're looking at sentiment indicators, but also other short-term indicators like global trade volumes, etc. They all would tell us, and here you have the example of the manufacturing PMI, they all would tell us that indeed we have a kind of even V-shaped recovery. The economic activity is going to improve. We're going to have a stronger third quarter. We're probably going to have a less strong but still positive fourth quarter with some base effect leveling that out. And also, we're trying to put together something for the CE region with our recovery index, which is basically a combination of electricity consumption, mobility, commuting, retail, and all these things. So you see also the region is not spared from this recovery. One thing, when you really look into the detail, also in the recovery index, which is going up and then flattening, and the PMI also not going straight up, is we're certainly not yet out of the woods. There is still a lot of uncertainty which will create a bumpy road ahead of us. And in particular, when you look at timing, there is the ZEW indicator, another sentiment thing, which has a short-term and a long-term component. The short term, the current view, is still very much in the cellar. It's very much down. And that is also why safe haven investments like gold are still going up. But in the long run, at least we do have an outlook. The outlook. So, as I said, a tangible rebound in the third quarter, supported by a very strong base effect. Then some slowdown. We do see that in consensus estimates. For GDP growth, for the CE region, the US, the Eurozone, a strong turn to the negative for this year. a upswing and stabilizing at really decent levels for the next year. As strong as any recovery in the third, fourth quarter will be, it will not prevent us from having here negative results for the full year. At different levels, certainly. The Eurozone probably hit quite harshly because we have countries like Spain, Italy, etc. In there as well. So forget about this year, it will be deeply negative. However, what will help us getting out of the crisis is probably that the situation that we have right now is totally different to the situation that a lot of people compare it to quite often, which has been the financial crisis previously. Previously, it was a failure of the system. It was a lack of confidence within the system. The system didn't work. Right now, we have an external impact which basically stops the entire system. We have an equal impact on the demand side, on the production side, and that probably will be mutually lifted and would help us to probably get out of the situation maybe even a little bit quicker. EU funding, any government support, whether it's locally, whether it's on multinational area, whether it's focused on R&D for healthcare or on broader scale, any measures such as Kurzarbeit and all these things will probably also help us to get out of the doldrums a bit quicker. The absolute condition, obviously, and that's why it's great to see all you sitting here with a mask, is we're avoiding another general lockdown. Everybody is talking about a second wave. I mean, undoubtedly, the second wave is already rolling. As long as it is not a second wave, but a bunch of smaller waves which can be dealt with in local clusters, not resulting in general lockdowns, it will be bad enough. It will have a lot of impact, as I will show you, but it will not get us in a negative situation as we have seen it in the second quarter. And of course, and here the responsibility is with you, mid to long-term treatment, vaccination are also absolutely crucial. Otherwise, all I'm talking about here is basically theory. The recovery, as I presented that, obviously does not come without any risk. As I said, the growth rates will be tangible, but those are relative rates. It's a percentage change. The absolute loss in wealth that we have experienced this year is and will be still tremendous. And it will take quite some time, so several years, until we have recovered that loss in wealth as an absolute figure. I'm showing here the unemployment figures just as an imagination of what the impact will be. A lot of people will not be able to return to their work. A lot of people will be trained differently, will find new positions and so on, and it all will take quite some time. In particular, since we're coming from a situation where employment was so strong and we have been falling off from that level. Being not employed, potentially not being able to pay my rent as an individual, as a company, or as a government supporting people to do so, obviously will have an impact on debt levels. We have seen that in the previous crisis also on household levels, but those are kind of stable and returned to kind of moderate levels. We have seen that on corporate levels, companies taking on debt to deal with the pandemic, and they were paying back quite nicely and reliably. Government, as I said, are crucial in terms of supporting us, and that's why public obviously will increase big time. They did so in the previous crisis. Unfortunately, the problem with government debt is it's quite sticky. Once it increases, it will never go down. In fact, in the case of CE, the red line below, it went down. So our company and the countries here really took the chance. So overall, I would say CE is in a better, so that entire region is in a better position than any global economy. And the current situation, the public support is absolutely arguable and absolutely necessary, because if I say I can't pay my whatever, I lose taxes, etc., this is an investment into making people able to pay back then in the next years. And finally, a very technical thing on the left side, this is port congestion. So basically container volume. And what you see quite nicely, in February, it got all stuck in China. Yeah, and then they started moving, and then it got stuck and ended up somewhere in Europe and elsewhere in the world. So that basically tells you how sensitive we are to global value chains, to supply chains. And I think going forward, that will be also quite a challenge and quite a strategic target, not to break into globalization, but to bring in some strategic considerations to make the entire system more stable, to make it less affected by any new pandemic that might come. Good. In terms of corporate earnings, we're running here a model which basically does not only look at what is the growth rate of, in this case here, particular regions, but also what is the momentum of these growth rates in consensus, so the total of all analysts. And the interesting and most crucial thing right now is we're not only developing, showing growth, but it's also coming in and improving at pretty high speed. And I mean, CEE, in terms of absolute growth, is the smallest. It's a small region compared to others, but at least right now it's developing, it's adding to that tiny number quite quickly. And this certainly has not always been the case. So when you see that development of earnings growth momentum at the bottom, it was negative for quite a while. Now that is moving at quite some speed. And what is probably even more important is, I mean, we always had peaks of that momentum in the past, but right now we're at levels where it sits on the maximum. And this really should give us some confidence that for quite some time, the corporate recovery and the earnings production is quite reliable, and the recovery is also in the corporate sector. And finally, in terms of sector base, as my mother told me, when you're a guest somewhere, be polite to the host. In this case, quite easy. The red-shaped line, that is by consensus again, so not only by our imagination. That is the earnings trend over time for the healthcare industry. I have that indexed, so it shows you the relative distance to other sectors. So I would say you're exactly in the right sector in terms of earnings trends right now. That is a very stable situation, not even a massive recovery, but you always have been on a very good track in that sector. If anybody would have a feeling that markets are extremely nervous, volatile, and sensitive to news flow right now, you're absolutely right. I mean, we have volatility. Obviously, February, March, we have seen levels which we hardly have ever seen before. It came down, but you see in the latest spikes, markets are obviously ready to get into that nervous mode anytime. And the main question basically is why is that? Usually in terms of political impact, we're looking at an instrument, the Policy Uncertainty Index, which is basically screening media by certain keywords, Brexit, US elections, or COVID-19. And that gives us a kind of level how nervous markets are or could be in terms of news flow. The same institution that produces this Policy Uncertainty Index on the left side, they have done a study in terms of how responsive, how sensitive markets right now are to pandemic situations. And they developed another indicator, call it an index, the Equity Market Volatility Tracker, they call it. For bird flu, for SARS, for MERS, for Ebola, for all the diseases we had in the recent history, we had index levels over time, and during the period of these pandemics, index levels ranging between 1 or 2. The same indicator for the coronavirus, for COVID-19, it started at a similar level of 1 in December, and then it went up to levels up to 60 in March. So that already tells you that media coverage, spreading media, connecting all these things, putting all that stuff together, has never been as strong as in this situation. As a result, on equity markets, the chart on top is, since 1900, so including even the Spanish flu, we had stock market movements up or down of 2.5% or more. It's about 1,000 something for these 120 years. So that makes about, I don't know, 0.8 per month. And 0 of these up and downs were related to news related to pandemic. So not even the Spanish flu created a stock market impact. February to March, so basically 1 month, we had 18 days up or down, plus minus 2.5%. And evenly, they were related to either pandemic news or government response to that. So that tells you we have really never had a situation where markets were so responsive to a healthcare situation than we have it right now. This kind of being responsive to a daily changing situation was in fact then, and lately you have seen the result in performance, we were hitting markets which were in a very fragile state anyway. Left bottom, you see relative performance of the US, of Europe, and also of the Central and Eastern European region. Again, index to give you a comparison. In Europe, we recovered quite nicely. We made it up like half of what we lost, maybe. In the US, they went up to levels even higher than before of the crisis. There was a certain sentiment, again, in particular for the stock market. We like to use here a copper-gold relation, which gives you a kind of feeling for the risk-taking attitude of markets. It went up a little bit. It certainly went not up strong enough to justify the market increases that we had. And altogether, that has created in valuation, which here as a premium to the long-term historical average, they went up through the roof. And now the question at some point was, what needs to happen in terms of future earnings that would justify, for in particular the US market, to be traded at almost 50% premium to what it was worth in the past? So what needs to come to justify that if we just have a recovery coming out of a hole to levels where we have been before? So the recovery was priced in much too euphorically, and that has created a market situation which was quite fragile. Now infection rates and all this stuff, remember the previous slide, going up. Here we are, we have a nice correction, and probably as long as nothing major will happen, we'll be rather on a sideways track. And I think that would be already a positive development. So in this environment, looking at sectors, I mean, investors, they like to shift from time to time, depending on where we are in the economic cycle, depending on what the mood is. A good indication is the relative performance of cyclical versus defensive industries. Healthcare by nature is rather on the defensive side. So since we had, till to the last weeks where we had the correction, we had a very strong sentiment, good run-up in stock markets. There was already an indication that people start to take more trust, that people start playing on the cyclical recovery, investing more in cyclical industries. Technology has been a good example, is a very early cycle sector. Next ones would be industrials, which would be basic resources, etc. We do see indications that people start to move in here, which would basically mean that the outperformance, again, the red line, this is you basically, it's the entire healthcare coverage that we have in the region, but also the Euro Stoxx healthcare segment has outperformed. If that shift would happen, probably that continued outperformance would be a little bit at risk. If we now but split the sector into kind of like plain vanilla healthcare and R&D in that particular combination that we have right now, R&D in healthcare would probably have the capacity to join still the cyclical part, and even a sector rotation, if it might come, would still look at least some particular healthcare companies, so you are not yet out of the game. Just to see a little bit of development, how stable the sector basically is. At the bottom, this is the change in target prices that we have done throughout the year, so under the impression of the pandemic. There is a few sectors which are ahead, because technology was doing great, and We had companies like 10 Square Games, which are going through the roof for good reasons, but healthcare always has been positive, always has been very stable, also in development of target prices. We had reasons to constantly increase throughout the year, which has not been the case for the entire universe that we look at. When I was asking my colleague who looks at the sector as a sector specialist for healthcare, was asking her about what are the particular risks for the sector right now. She came up with that slide. The first part did not really surprise me. I mean, just as a news ticker, I mean, as I said, news is driving the market right now, and obviously the pandemic is driving the healthcare sector. The good news is these news and this impact also hits the regional part of the sector, so also companies in our universe do come up with news flow that is related to the current situation. So they're also part of overall of that development chart here in terms of treatment, in terms of therapy, in terms of vaccination. That was so far to be expected. What I found a little bit surprising actually is at the bottom, a survey among companies like how much are you impacted in terms of performing trials, and 80% said yes, we are impacted to the negative, because apparently it is difficult to get people into trial because they have mobility restrictions and whatsoever. So I don't know how much that matches your experience, but I found that quite interesting that a very simple technical thing might come up as a particular risk for a sector. So it's not all shiny, but I think the upper chart looks nicer. We should take that as a stronger argument. Finally, the unavoidable ESG. A lot of funding, probably also a lot of funding coming from the EU, will be used to build that new Green Deal, which overall probably will also be quite supportive for the healthcare sector, because traditionally it is considered as a core ESG investment. In the region, it has started, or overall ESG has started in terms of fund flow, in terms of a theme where people put their money on at about 2015. When you look at top left, the accumulated flows have been rising quite nicely, and lately, since markets were so shaky, even rising stronger than the ordinary flows. So they were kind of going down a little bit. ESG is a constant way to the upside, which does not necessarily means that ESG investments will create an outperformance, but at least there is a lot of flow into that, creating a long-term pressure for that investment style to increase, improve in the long run. In terms of assets being invested, again, here you see that probably also under the impact of the crisis, assets being put, ESG assets being put on healthcare have kind of jump-started during the crisis. And also when I look at flows at the bottom, and here that is a 3-month, a little bit of smoothened average of flows for global markets, but also for emerging markets, we do see some slowdown here. But we still see two sectors which are definitely outperforming, which is technology and it's healthcare. It will depend a little bit on overall market mood. It will depend on a certain kind of sector rotation, what I mentioned earlier, etc. But overall, I would state that ESG is just another opportunity for investing into the healthcare sector. At this point, I would like to thank you for your patience. I would congratulate you to the great new facility that you have here. Wish you good luck. Wish all of us good luck as long as we need it. Thank you.
Henning Keskusen, thank you for your speech, for your presentation, describing situation from the market point of view, prices knowledge. Thank you. Proszę Państwa, jak mówią Amerykanie...
Ladies and gentlemen, like the Americans put it, last but not least, or a strawberry on top instead of a cherry. So now we have 2 short virtual walks ahead of us, and then a short conversation with Professor Boros. But first, a short virtual trip over the conference rooms. I saw them in person yesterday. I liked the one with Etna and volcanic rocks best. They are true volcanic rocks. So Małgosia Siewiecka now showing us conference spaces. So along with Viola, we are walking around the interiors of our R&D center. We can meet in Gdynia, Stockholm, Barcelona, or Naples on the same day. Today, with the teleconferencing technology, this is entirely possible, but this is not the type of a meeting that I meant. The fall is already here, so we moved to Bora Bora along with Viola. Viola, tell us, why is it so great? Why is it such a great room? It's one of my favorites, in fact. It provides you with a very holiday spirit, with the holiday mood. The floors are blue. You've got blue also on the walls, which is relaxing you, but at the same time, it focuses you on the topic of the conversation. When you're in the room and you focus on a specific topic, it's easier here. You've mentioned before we started this conversation that the walls in this room are breathing. What does it mean? They have been made using a specific material, a special material, ground PET bottles, so plastic bottles, cut into fibers and then pressed together. This offers unique properties. It's a breathing surface, but it's also perfect for acoustics, and this was very important for us in conference rooms. Is every single conference room built according to the same principle? General principles, like construction principles, are the same, but every single room looks different, because Bora Bora is blue and holiday-like, but we also have a conference room named Gdynia. It's a Polish room on a different floor, on a different level, where you see more industrial, shipyard-like climate. There is actually a part of an original transportation container nailed to the wall. So it feels like you're in one of the containers. Let me just add that the names of the rooms, they were not chosen by accident. They were chosen by our employees. There was a competition, so they shared their inspirations from holidays, from the vacation that they had, and they were to a large extent responsible for coming up with these ideas, with the ideas behind these places, these conference rooms. Every room is fitted out with state-of-the-art teleconferencing equipment, video equipment. There is an electronic room booking system, so everyone can find a comfortable space. So when we are here on the lagoon, let me go back to the main room for a moment, and in the meantime, I'll try to find you and show you relaxation zones that we prepared and comfort zones that we prepared for our employees. And maybe we could go to the beach also for a moment. I think they encouraged you to perhaps have a walk around the building and see for yourself what it looks like. And now I'm looking towards Professor Piotr Boros, representing the Institute of Tuberculosis and Lung Disease. Thank you for joining us. In a moment, I will give the floor over to you to see a presentation. But before we do that, one thing that I wanted to ask, Mr. President said that pandemics is going to stay with us for a while, and it's best to get used to it, right? Do you share that opinion? Well, yes, it's very likely that this is exactly what's going to happen. Unfortunately, perhaps fortunately, because there are some benefits associated with it as well, probably. For instance, telemedicine is booming, it's flourishing. It was in a cradle, and now it turns out that a lot can be handled this way. Right, I was hospitalized, and everything happened via phone. Right, the majority of patients who came for some sort of a certificate from a physician or a prescription, they don't have to do that anymore. They don't have to sit in a waiting room. They can handle things from their homes. So now, medicine in the age of pandemic. Over to you. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, before I start, I have to mention two things. Issue number one is that Mr. President allowed me to say whatever I want. The title was specific, but I can talk about whatever I wanted under this title, just to be true to life. So that I attempted to make it this way. And another thing that I would like to mention is that since I know that we are being listened to also by guests who are listening in English, I will speak in Polish. The majority of my presentation is based on pictograms or images, but I left titles in English. I hope it will not disturb you. So the title focuses on what we know, what we don't know, and what is still ahead. So I will start the way you normally would. You have seen the news today, and so this is nothing shocking. We've got 30-something million cases confirmed by now, nearly 1 million deaths and 22 million recovered. You see Polish data also presented here. Nearly 2,500 deaths so far. So this is a situation globally. But if you have a look at the graphs, you can see very clearly that after a short peak over the holidays, we did in fact have a second wave rolling through. You see that things are going up. Silesian province is in the lead, Mazowieckie and Wielkopolskie on its heels. But if you have a look on it from the medical perspective, luckily 99% of patients are going through that disease in a mild form. They may not even require any intervention. Only 1% of the patients are now contained somewhere in ICUs or hospitals. When we talk about deaths, after the peak at the initial stage, there was a sort of a plateau, and now, unfortunately, the numbers are growing once again. So, very short introduction, a bit of history or a historical outlook. If you have a look at the history of humankind from the perspective of how we inhabited the Earth, you see that we see the increase in the number of Earth dwellers. It's a logarithmic scale, obviously. So we started at 120 million when Christ was born to nearly 8 billion now. There were epidemics throughout that time. They curbed our spreading throughout the world. Plague was one of them. And not long ago, there was a genetic analysis published of that plague epidemic that allowed us to follow the epidemic and its progress. And it turns out that once again it started somewhere in Asia and it came over to us and then went back to China and then crawled across the world in several years. There were no planes, and yet 3 years were enough for the pandemic to go both ways around the world. So it was very effective in terms of travel. Then the same bacteria, once again, Black Death, 800 years later, it probably killed 1/3 of the humankind. So 1/3 of the humankind died out. It took a bit longer than 3 years. It circulated across Europe, and that was the first moment when quarantine as a word, as an idea was mentioned. So it was the first time that the idea cropped up that the diseased should be isolated, that perhaps we shouldn't be in contact with them, and the diseases seem to be transmitting among people. So it's not just from the East that the diseases came to us. Europe was the source of pandemic and epidemic for Native Americans, for instance. Several years after the Europeans going to North America, the Native Americans were killed by salmonella. 90% of the then population of Mexico died out because of salmonella. So these were bacterial infections. Now a few words about virals. Smallpox, of course, killed thousands of people before, but the largest epidemics came in the 17th century, and then the Spanish Spanish flu, another virus that attacked approximately 100 years ago. You see here that coronavirus can live outside of the organism even up to 9 days. This is a wrong statement. The virus is not alive. It's got no metabolism. It's not able to be mobile on its own. It lasts. It waits. It's not alive. It may not become disintegrated, but it's hard to call it life. What it has in common with bacteria is that it does have genetic material and proteins, and it causes disease, but it's not alive. It's just something that was manufactured. It's self-manufactured, but it's got no metabolism. It's not mobile, and it's just patiently waiting for us to launch it. The difference between bacteria and viruses is that viruses are very, very small, and because of that, they are easily penetrating and traveling. What do we know about this epidemic? And this is the main hero of this presentation today. It's an electronic microscope photograph. This is how we imagine its structure to look like. Of course, today we know much more than we did some time ago. We've got full genetic sequence defined, 30,000 bases, nucleic bases. We know the construction. It doesn't know that it's not true that it's completely stable, because, see, these are the mutations of the virus already found and detected all around the world. And on the one hand, that's wrong, that's bad, because it's a problem for vaccination manufacturing. But on the one hand, perhaps it's good, because these mutations seem to be going for more infectious potential, but less virulence. So the disease is milder. Where did it come from, the virus? Like all coronaviruses, or not all, but all the major ones, all the most noxious ones, come from bats. It broke the interspecies barrier twice, because normally viruses stick to the species that they like, but it happened twice that this virus broke it twice. It's not really clear whether it was a snake or something else, but somehow it jumped over to the human being, and that's where it came from. And now when you compare that virus against all the previous coronaviruses, like SARS that we experienced 18 years back in China and Hong Kong, and MERS 8 years ago, this one is much more noxious, only 3% mortality. MERS, it was 34, or 10% for SARS, not to mention Ebola or Nipah virus that were not truly killers. But if you see the column of numbers, now we've got 32 million people already infected, so 1 million deaths. And if we assume that in order to create herd immunity, and I will come back to that in a moment, we need for at least 60% of the population to go through the disease, 60% of the population of the world. So that's 140 million deaths. It's a population of Russia, for instance, to compare it to something. So, or Japan, Mexico. This is the order of this number. If we translate that to Poland, it would mean, in a very pessimistic scenario, 650,000 deaths. But this is not true. Why? Because that 3%, these are the identified cases, identified deaths because of COVID-19, and I will come back to what that means in fact. Another issue when it comes to mortality and case fatality, this is not stable, not in time and not geographically. For instance, Sweden, mortality in Sweden, you see there's a peak at the initial period of the epidemic, and then it goes down because, well, they introduced some limitations later on. In Italy, you see the course of the events. We find, luckily, we remain somewhere approximately 3%, close to Germany, close to global average, and this is a fairly optimistic prognosis when it comes to the data that we have on hand. Another question is, how do we avoid infection? Is it possible? We know that the virus is being propagated mainly in the form of droplets or aerosol. Masks is a topic that has been thoroughly discussed, but the principle is in fact very simple. This is, the higher the propagation starts, the further it goes. And of course, if both sides wear a mask, the likelihood of infection is potentially the smallest. So I think this is a thoroughly discussed topic. I will not go back to that, but I would like to focus on something else. Everyone talked about the air transmission. Some wondered what sort of concentration of alcohol you need to have in an exhaled air to stop the virus on entry, which is not possible, by the way. But I would like to wonder about the virus that lands on surfaces. This is underappreciated, I think, because if you have a look at how long the virus can survive, can last on various types of surfaces, it seems to be doing very well on plastic. Copper is relatively safe. Why do I mention that? Because some years back there was a very interesting information published that doorknobs made of brass seem to limit or reduce the infection rate, and it seems to be making sense because copper in contact with sweat turn out to exude ions that prevent infection. They do not look great because they develop patina on them, but they are healthy. They are good for your health. So brass or copper is good for your health. So this is a scientific analysis that seems to prove that this is true, even though I haven't seen really a lot of hard evidence, highest quality scientific data is not yet available, but still there is something. So now a question about the vaccine. Can we protect ourselves against infection? According to WHO, we already have 36 candidate vaccines available somewhere in the world. Of course, there are different antigen determinants taken into account when creating these vaccines, so there is a large spectrum, a broad spectrum of possibilities. But there is something else that is interesting in this context. So far, the case was that in order to manufacture a vaccine that's been accepted by regulators in specific countries, you would need over a dozen years. See, this is the period from the moment basic research starts until the vaccine is finally launched. It's over a dozen years. And now, because of the situation, it hasn't even been a year, because it hasn't been a year. And yet, we already see the first vaccine that's been approved by FDA for limited use. So time has also been important for the regulators, but still, you have to do it well. It cannot be just done just to do it, just to launch the vaccine. So these two things have to be interrelated. But this is the situation for now. So, for instance, we have legal processes that are evaluating the product are going on in the process of scientific research, not once research ends. Why do we need vaccine? This is the concept of herd immunity. If you have a disease, like for instance in the upper part of the graph, you see that this is the mode of transmission. One person infects on average 4 people, and those infect another 4 people, so this is developing geometrically, and the entire population gets infected. The idea is that we should create within the population a group of people who are not susceptible to infection. So they have even been inoculated or they went through the disease. And the idea is that finally the transmitting individual is going to only expose those who have been inoculated or are not sensitive to the disease. But for that to happen, you have to have the appropriate number of those who are not sensitive to infection. And what does that number depends on R0, the reproductive index. This is the graph that shows you that if you have very infectious diseases like measles, rubella, or flu, we have to vaccinate nearly the entire population for transmission to stop. And this is what's happening with measles, for instance. The rate of vaccinations against measles dropped just a tiny little bit, and you already have foci of measles. But when it comes to flu and coronavirus as well, with very similar R0 of 2.5, 60% of the population seems to have to be somehow protected, whether by vaccination or previous disease, because, well, previous disease don't really tell us much, because we know that 3 months after going through the disease, the likelihood of staying healthy is high, but what happens later, we don't really know. There are confirmed cases of reinfection already, even though this was found in a person who had some sort of an immune defect at the beginning. But, well, anyhow, you need to have 60% of the population that is not prone to the disease for transmission to stop. So what next? What's coming next? If we do contract the disease, what do we know? We know that we might be lucky, and we might be one of the asymptomatic patients. Not too many of those, to be honest. The vast majority will know something 14 days after infection. Some symptoms develop, typically mild. The majority get healthy on their own. Genetic material of the virus is present in the person right from the very beginning, and it may stay even for 104 days after infection, which does not mean that throughout that period the patient is still infectious. It's not the same as having the genetic material of the virus in your body, and that's why 10 days after the beginning of the infection we may be able to consider individuals as safe to contact others. This is the profile of the genetic material presence and antibodies in human beings. We detected in the nasopharyngeal swab, however, the virus can be present in the stool for a long time. Let me say once again, it doesn't mean that that patient is still infectious. Talking about symptoms, mainly cough, fever, dyspnea, sometimes gastrointestinal symptoms, however, that is rare. The median of symptoms is 4 days of being symptomatic. That was 4 days in a group of 16,000 patients. You have to also remember that there are some patients who are seemingly asymptomatic. I'm talking about patients who perhaps have a slight cough, not even fever, but they do transmit that virus. They do transmit because they do have some sort of a disease, some sort of a symptom, but they will never find out if they do not get tested. So we should be aware of that, and we should remember that. You have to think about it. If you have any symptoms whatsoever that even remind you of COVID, perhaps you should consider going out, because you might sell it to someone, so to say. So now, asymptomatic quality, because there are so many myths around it that, 80% of us are or maybe asymptomatic. That's not true. The estimated value is 15%. So this is the number of asymptomatic patients. So 1 in 6 infected individuals will not develop any symptoms. However, there are some people who do that. So theoretically, they will not have any fever, no cough, no dyspnea, and yet they do have the virus. Now, what's happening next? If the virus infiltrates our body, we actually saw that, a little bit of that process before, but let me remind you, if there isn't much of the virus and the immune response of our body, our immune response to the virus is well balanced, as it should be, then typically nothing serious happens. So we do develop some sort of symptoms. So we do have fever, a little bit of cough, maybe some dyspnea, maybe not. And then in general, that will lead to full recovery very quickly. The misfortune starts when we either get a lot of the replicated virus, so the amount of variance is high, or our body responds in an inadequate manner. It overly responds, because it's not really the virus that kills us. Our body kills us. Our reaction to the virus, cytokine storm that is being caused by viral infiltration, causes all the damage. So there is damage, then attempted repair. That repair is not really the way it should be. Some tissues cannot be recovered in an appropriate manner, and so that may lead to multi-organ failure and death. Luckily, this route is very rare. 80% of people recover from COVID-19 without any further problems. They do not require hospitalization. Isolation facility, as you said, is entirely sufficient. However, unfortunately, we do have cases like this as well, where after a short period of disease, you initially had a beautiful lung tissue, and then it becomes, well, it looks almost like a a liver. This cannot be used for breathing at all, so this is a post-mortem sample, as you might imagine. So it does happen as well, fortunately rarely. Now, can we treat COVID-19? We did hear the answer to that. Yes, we can. Nearly 2,000 clinical trials are now going on, interventional clinical trials registered globally, focusing on COVID-19. 500 in Europe. In Poland, we have at least 7 registered clinical trials. They started in China, so because, well, there was abundant material at the very beginning, but now the number of studies is spreading throughout the world, throughout Europe, Asia, and both Americas. Like it was mentioned before, in truth, that disease has 3 stages. Stage number 1 is infiltration by the virus. The virus is destroying something, and then the symptoms are relatively mild: fever, cough, or perhaps, well, not really dyspnea as yet. And then the response of our body starts, response to infection. And then depending on the severity of this response, a multitude of things can happen. So we have 2 goals. Goal number 1 is antiviral. And it was mentioned already that remdesivir seems to be the therapy of choice that has been registered. It's effective. It's got its AEs, but it's there. Now, about immunomodulators, so focusing not on the virus, but on the host body, trying to inhibit excessive response. We are talking about corticosteroids and dexamethasone in this case. Now, talking about today's guidelines, of course, they are as they see them here in green. Remdesivir, where you have a patient who requires treatment because there is respiratory insufficiency because of COVID. And you see that there is a recommendation against using chloroquine. So, you know, there was much ado about that at the very beginning, that it was an antiviral. We know it's not true. But when talking about corticosteroids therapy, yes, in patients who do have respiratory insufficiency, they require oxygen therapy or mechanical ventilation. But there is a counter indication for dexamethasone if there is no respiratory insufficiency. Why? Because glucocorticosteroids inhibit our response to the virus. So if there is no excessive response in the form of respiratory insufficiency, you cannot dampen it, because then you only harm the patient and you can potentially increase mortality. Like I said, at this phase, this is a stage where the virus is still working, response is developing, but the operation of the virus is relatively strong. You can still use remdesivir. If that response of the host is too strong, it's too violent, there may be features of excessive inflammation. Dexamethasone is the way to go, but only if the patient requires oxygen therapy. What is there that we still don't know? What is ahead? Well, we don't know how much is ahead. That's the response to the question, because in truth, that is going to be a smoldering epidemic, probably. There are several scenarios out there, but it's very likely that we will not be able to get rid of the virus for the 2, 3, or even 4 years to come. This is what we still don't know. It seems to us that in Poland we've got 80,000 cases. The estimations that you see now prove that there are in fact more cases than that, but the question is how much more? Twice as many? Because there are such estimations as that. On the one hand, we are concerned because we don't know how many patients there are, but that's actually good news. Why? Because these estimates are much lower, because now we are not only talking about 80,000 cases, perhaps it's much more, and then 2,000 or 2,500 deaths per the estimated number is even less than 3%. So it should make us happy that we don't really know how many patients infected are out there. That's good news. So now about prognosis. Well, there are so many unknowns here, because it all depends on whether we do have vaccine or not, what the weather is going to be like, what the mutations of the virus are going to be like. So there are many question marks, but on the basis of what we do know, it is estimated that in Poland we will probably have 20,000 deaths until the end of the year. So we now have 2,500, so a lot is yet to come. Some people think that if, like in Singapore, 95% of people wear masks and do not take them off, then there is a chance that we will only be talking about 5,000 deaths by the end of the year. We don't know that. This is only an estimate and prognosis. Some forecasts say, this is for instance how many hospital beds we might need around Christmas. It is very likely that we might need as many as 6,000 ICU beds in Poland. We have only 4,000, so the situation might be tough. However, the margin of error here is relatively high, but still, I think this is going to be a difficult moment for organizational, logistic point of view. You know, around Christmas, healthcare system is not really working great. So, of course, all that raises certain fears, anxiousness. It may even paralyze us, but on the other hand, we should be happy because still there are some clinical trials being conducted that try to curb that fear and limit the problem. I think we are at a perfect place to talk about it because this is one of the locations where that sort of research studies are going to be conducted. We will know more. Perhaps we will have new solutions. And to finish with, one curious item. This is a questionnaire showing how people trust, to what extent people trust what they hear about coronavirus. In the majority of countries, as you can see, the most reliable source of information is the healthcare professional, a doctor, a physician, somebody, a healthcare professional. It's worse when it comes to family, government, media, that varies. The only country that is different is Poland. In Poland, the most reliable source of information are family, friends, and only then perhaps the doctor, physician. The government is somewhere really far, far behind. Thank you so much for your attention. Bravo, Professor Piotr Boros. Thank you very much, Professor. We were just texting with some friends. This is recorded all here. And I would actually like to ask all of you to disseminate this 15-minute presentation by Professor Boros, because it was really excellent, very synthetic, very clear. This should go on YouTube, and specifically this final slide. Right, it's almost over. One more video to see. I will now show you the open space of this beautiful center. Green areas that we've already mentioned is not the only zone for relaxation that was constructed for the employees of this facility. A beach is a perfect place for that. It's a beach bar. It's a social space where our employees can enjoy a warm meal. They can prepare something nice to drink, but not only that, because since it's a beach bar, we need some sea climate. These are the interiors that provide for comfortable relaxation and physical activity. The beach is also physical activity. So this is somewhere where you can do your exercise in between experiments. Level 2 of our center is dominated by water and everything that goes along with it. So I'll see you soon at the sea. Right, that was Małgosia Siewierska. Thank you so much. She was our virtual host and guide. Thank you so much for this tour. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me first say goodbye to all those of you who joined us online. Thank you for staying with us for over 2 hours. I hope it was fruitful. We're about to close the meeting now, both online and offline. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure for me to be your host. I congratulate to you on the opening of this wonderful facility, keeping my fingers crossed. Thank you so much, and now it's time to